Tonight, I have Elie Wiesel on my mind for one of his many important teachings. It was he who shared that a scholar is much admired in Judaism. And what a scholar is called is a Talmid Chacham, a student of wisdom. In our tradition, wisdom is not something that is your defining quality. It's an aspiration. The defining quality is being a student who pursues wisdom. And as soon as one says, well, I am wise, I have all I need to know that that person is a confederate, is not really wise. Because the world is always changing. Needs, variables, one's own self-understanding. To be wise is to be a person in pursuit of wisdom. Now, the reason that piece is on my mind is because of our Torah reading, which is Parshat Korach. Korach, and there's much to be said about him, is, of all the biblical characters, the one most identified with a fraudulent complaint against Moses. He's a con artist. The paradigm of the rabble-rouser speaking in terms of populism when the goal is really his own power. An important teacher in Israel was a man named Yeshayahu Leibovitz. I had the privilege to meet Yeshayahu Leibovitz when I was a young man. I was 17, 18 years old. When I was sitting in the public library at Hebrew University, and I was writing a paper on Yeshayahu Leibovitz, because I had heard him speak, and I was fascinated by him saying to people, beware of polemicists and those who justify war, right after the 1973 Yom Kippur War. And so I was writing this paper about him. It's a longer story, but here's the punchline. I told him I was writing a paper. He said, what are you writing about? Come out into the hallway of the library. I want to hear about it. He then engaged me in a conversation about his philosophy, and he said, now when you finish the paper, you got to share it with me. This is 1973, when there wasn't really photocopy machines widely available. And I gave him the paper. He said, come back. I came back. He had a copy for me and a copy for himself. He went through the paper line by line with check marks, but only over the things he said. I did it as a dialogue, as if it was between him and the founding chief rabbi, Rabbi Avram Yitzchak Kook. But here's where I'm going. While I was engaged in this conversation with him, he paused. There was a deaf mute who had come in who was the garbage man. And he stopped our conversation, got up from his desk, took his garbage, greeted the garbage man, who was going office by office, and emptied it. Put it down, and then he continued to engage in what was a severe critique of how I had presented his ideas. Tomorrow, I'll talk more about Korach. But tonight, I just want to say that greatness of Rabbi Professor Yeshayahu Leibovitz, who was the chair of the history of science at Hebrew University, and a great scholar of Talmud and Maimonides, and Elie Wiesel, who throughout his life studied everyday sacred text, who throughout his life spent time reflecting through his writing on what he had learned, for me are paradigms of what Korach was not. Stay tuned tomorrow to hear how the demagogue presents holiness, the religious aspiration to be close to God. Ribono Shalom, Master of the universe, may we know that life is the privilege of continuing to learn, to grow, to change, to hear, and to process. May we know that to be wise is to aspire to wisdom actively, that to be loving is to aspire to be more loving, and that to be holy, close to you, is not a state, but an aspiration that draws us closer to you. May we feel drawn toward your light and your love. Amen.